The Unbroken Place podcast with Eddy Thomas is a production of Say Something Studios. Welcome back to The Unbroken Place, where it begins and ends with empathy. I'm your host, Eddy Thomas, life and leadership coach, and this week I get to have a deep conversation with Sira Talatu Kebe. I have a special place in my heart for peace workers and missionaries. In particular, I have a very special place in my heart for the work that Sira does. She is a counselor specializing in trauma healing, crisis response, and biblical counseling for pastors in some of the most underserved areas on the planet. On this episode, we focus on women. In particular, we focus on how men can be better advocates for women. Sira serves women who have survived and, quite frankly, overcome human trafficking and other abuses. So listeners, please be advised. I want to let you know that some of the subject matter is not one to watch if you're on YouTube with us today, or listen to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to us today, aloud in front of young ears. So let's go. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sira. We are speaking today, folks, with Sira Talatu Kebe, who is a missionary working in the mental health space, not just around the world, but she also does it domestically here as well. And so we are touching on a topic today that is not one that you want to have the kids around for. So make sure that this is either in your ears or you're alone. But we are talking about women who are in a place of needing to be overcomers. And what are they overcoming? It's sexual abuse, violence that they've experienced in their lives from their partners, whether that be male or female. And for me specifically, and my questions as Sira goes through kind of explaining a lot of different things, will be really focused on how can I be a better man supporting women who are overcoming what they've dealt with. So thank you for jumping on here today. I know that you have a busy schedule. In fact, you just gave a presentation about this last week. But I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start here in terms of the sexual abuse that you spoke of. It seems pervasive in our culture, and I know that as you serve around the world, it's also around the world something that women experience. So just kind of unpack what that looks like for you, globally as well as domestically, as a mental health worker.
What we're seeing, Eddy, is an increase. I would say within the last 10 years even, we are seeing an increase of awareness. Not necessarily an increase of abuse. It's actually been around since the beginning of time, honestly, but the awareness, how it's discussed, or how it's articulated is very different depending on cultures around the world, including the US. But within the last 10 years, especially, I would say even later than that, when they had this Me Too, when the Me Too movement came out,
Ronna Burke.
and it's still very, I would say around 2015 on, when people started being aware of course, they're talking about the sexual harassment in the workplace, talking about, misogynistic behavior, all these kind of things that are going on, and how to overcome it, because it was like, okay, we can't talk about it. But then it was like, okay, me too. I've experienced that, but didn't want to talk about it before. So now you got a lot of people, and the advent of really using the cell phones and videotaping and all of that, when things are going on in the house, in the stores, other environments, other domains, folks are whipping out that phone putting on
Mm-hmm.
record. It's happening everywhere. Even now, as we're speaking, a high profile entertainer is being
Yeah.
sex trafficking, all these things, Rico violence. I mean, heavy, all mixed in, and that would not have happened 20 years ago. And we're talking about things
Mm-hmm.
that not actually some of those things that happened with this entertainer was 20 years ago, but now
Yeah.
it's coming out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what's happening now, you're getting more people who are, and I would say it's the advent of more of a self-preservation, number one. And then number two, I would say also people who want to express themselves more, because that is
Mm-hmm.
one of the ways to overcome. And we'll
Yeah.
get more into that a little bit later with another question or another segment. But to understand what's happening is to understand that people are becoming more aware and they're caring more about themselves. Because
Yeah.
in the past, like I said, this is not something that is just happening more now. It's been happening forever, but people are talking about it now
Yeah.
more because they're feeling more comfortable wanting to express themselves because they need the healing. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what has
Mm.
to happen. You'll hear me saying that a little bit later on as well. One of the ways to overcome is to express yourself. And there's many ways and avenues to do that as far as what has happened to you. I was watching an old episode of Law and Order Special Victims Unit, which talks a lot about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That is one of my favorite shows because it's so realistic. It's not just
Hmm.
entertainment. That stuff, and then you should put that disclaimer in the beginning of the show. It does happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll say
Yeah.
we change the names and things just to, these things happen. And those special victim unit episodes, they're pretty heinous. They said they're heinous
Yeah.
crimes, and they are. And they're sexually based, and this stuff really happens. And if you look at some of these old episodes, I look at some of them, I was on the old channel looking at some of them, they were talking about, we ain't talking about the incest. We're not talking about the brother or the father or the mother doing this stuff, and it comes out in the court and people going like this back in when it came out in the 70s and the 80s, and all
Yeah.
that stuff in the early 90s. People weren't talking about that, not openly, but you would see it on
Yeah.
SVU, but it's really happening. And now people are talking about it because they need that cleansing. They need that closure. They need peace.
Yeah. And I think the one thing is just to add to that is accountability.
Yes.
There are when Me Too started, um, I wouldn't say that I was unique in that I completely understood and I was on board. I was literally asking the trusted women in my life um, about it in terms of I've always been on board with trying to support humanity in general, which means that I'm, for women. I'm for the uplifting of all people. But when it came to Me Too, you know, I'm a man. I've been a man my entire life. So my viewpoint was always different. So I had to ask a lot of questions, and you know, I put it on the same level for me trying to learn about what women go through and how to be a good supporter of women, just like I try and provide empathy for my white brothers and sisters when I'm trying to understand what it means to be a black man in this country. You have to understand that they're going to trip and fall and stumble as they try and find the right way to say, the right way to advocate. Just like a man, if he's trying to support a woman, will fall. I'll say the wrong things, but I'm trying to be a support. So I think you're spot on with a lot of that. I look at, my life now. I'm a father. I'm married to a wonderful wife, and I'm gonna always be an advocate for them, but I'm always in a state of trying to understand more. Like, okay, what does it mean to be a teenage girl right now with social media? And the way in which women are sexualized online? What does it mean to try and protect your your teenage kids as they're looking at jumping online and having a YouTube channel and
Yeah.
all these crazy things? So it's, for me, I am less in a 80s and 90s mode of I'm a man, I know what I'm talking about, this is just how it's going to be, versus growing up a little bit, shutting up and listening a lot more, and having people like you that I can speak to about these things. So when we're looking at the survival aspect of this, I know, um, from my work in mental health for years, the number that is quoted often is that 1 in 4 women, maybe 1 in 5 women, report that they've had to survive something like this.
And
From my
even
personal
now, the
experience,
stats have changed a little. They're saying every 68 seconds, a woman
yeah,
is sexually violated. It could be an attack, it can be an attempt, it can be
hmm,
anything in that domain.
yeah,
That's a
yeah, and
minute
that,
and 8 seconds in the
yeah,
US.
yeah, and well, and here's what makes that stat tough for men to stomach, and should be tough for men to stomach. Those are just the women who report it.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so for me, being in those spaces, the mental health spaces, where whether you're working, regardless of what space you're working in, understand that the majority of women don't report it. The majority of women in my life that I have known for, decades, will tell me about, their experience, either growing up or in college or in the workplace, just trying to live their lives. This is a reality that, the statistics will never do justice for, because of everything that they have to think about when that happens. If I report this, gosh, do I go in front of a judge and tell my story for the world, and maybe they don't even acquit, or they don't even convict this person, they get acquitted? Does it risk my job to tell on my coworker? If you're a teenage girl, do I risk getting hurt by my partner if I tell someone? There's just so many things that go into getting into that space of overcoming, that I would love for you to just kind of unpack for us. What does it mean to overcome?
Okay. Well, you hit on a couple of little things that's very important when you talk about your own experience.
Hmm.
Um, that there are so many ways and there are many books. If you even go on Google and hit in the millions, not even the thousands, of what to do, who's written books, different things, webinars, you name it. But there are, I would say three general things you got to consider as I don't want to say victim. I would like to say someone who has overcome.
Yeah.
It's easy, and that's a psychological word that a lot of psychiatrists, even people in my contemporaries, they like to use victim, victim. That's
Hmm.
negative. I
Yeah.
I like to be more positive, because first of all, that negativity keeps people bound.
Yeah.
So the three things you have to look at, generally speaking, to overcome, to the point where, like, women have opened up to you. Like you said, most women do not talk about what has happened to them.
Yeah.
And the main three reasons why is, number one, guilt. And that's
Hmm.
broad, but it's and there's many things unpack. We can be here 3 hours just talking about guilt, but that's one of
Hmm.
them. Another one is shame. And shame, I'm gonna
Yeah.
come back to that, because that actually is even more detrimental and more caustic than guilt. And number
Hmm.
three, I would say trust and or lack of trust. It depends on, and they all kind of work together. Let me go back to shame,
Hmm.
and let's kind of compare it to guilt. We're talking about why women don't overcome, why they don't share, why they don't These are the reasons. And these three are not, like I said, they're not exhaustive. We got things inside of guilt. We have things inside of shame. But let's talk about those two in a general sense for time's sake. Guilt is basically feeling. When you feel guilty, you feel bad, you feel discouraged, it's a feeling based. It's something, it's emotional, which drives a behavior. Shame, it's not just that. A lot of people want to put them together. They want to interchange them both. But shame is even deeper. Shame is a state of being. I'll give a good example of that.
Okay.
Guilt says, I feel bad. I feel discouraged. It's a feeling. Shame says, I am bad. I
Okay.
deserve to be discouraged. I'm not worthy. It's a state of being. And it's so much harder to overcome a state of being than a feeling.
Yeah.
Feelings, if you go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, there are many things that are done. These are my contemporaries that will do their practical things that you can do to overcome feelings of inadequacies, even medications. You have anxiety, these things that bring about these feelings. A state of being is deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I like to talk about is the onion analogy. I wish I had my onion with me. I'm up. I wasn't in the kitchen. I should have brought it with me. When you're talking about trauma and abuse, and we're talking even heinous, even like multiple rapes or incest, and it goes on for, not about one or two times. I'm talking about their almost their entire childhood or even going into adulthood. And these are things I personally have experienced. And even as a counselor, I have counseled people, and we're talking about even Christians and even Christians in leadership, where the wife, they went through premarital counseling. The husband was a deacon, and he never got married. He married a little bit later, and he married this young lady that had premarital counseling that had never married even. She was a little bit younger than him, but she had a child out of wedlock. And so this child only knew this deacon because he always spent time with her. The baby was a few months old when they started dating and getting together. So by the time they got married, all that little girl knew was this man as the father figure. So that wasn't really the issue. 2 years into the marriage, they started having problems. They started coming to me for counseling. This is a real situation. And basically what happened was the communication stopped, other things started happening, and the leadership told the deacon, you all need counseling. Come to find out, and this I call the onion analogy because an onion has many layers. Even the skin has many layers. If you look at an onion, even the onion peel has layers. Not just the onion itself, even the onion peel has layers. The point I'm trying to make is when you have a trauma or a traumatic experience, especially with violence and sexual abuse, you can hit a certain level and you still got some other levels to deal with. And it's based on what you can unravel and what you're willing to share.
Yeah.
And that happens in the secular, even in the spiritual, in the Christian counseling. Just because you can pray for someone, lay hands, they can get delivered, but to stay delivered, you got to get out of that environment. You got to change your mindset, and there are scriptures that talk about all that. But the bottom line is, it's not just a matter of just okay, that's fine. And God can do that 100%. But you got to stay in that particular, you got to do something. Ephesians 4, 22, 24 talks about putting off and putting on. And that's true. Whatever you put off, you better put something else on in its place. If you don't, you always hear about people in churches, oh, I got delivered. And then 6 months later, they're back in the same thing. You wondering how that happened. They
Mm.
have to put in the work.
Yeah.
And that's something we have to understand. Even as Christians, in Christianity, you got to put on some of it. You got to work. God does a lot of things, but even as believers, we are required, and it's biblical, to do some things. If we don't, we'll go right back into that cycle. And God will allow it. Now, getting back to shame and guilt and state of being, if
Hmm.
you believe you are bad, I am, you are, state of being. We're not talking about you feel bad. You believe it. We got to change a whole mindset, a whole paradigm. That don't happen
Yeah.
overnight. That ain't happening in one little deliverance service. Some of the layers will come off. Don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting it at all because I'm a firm believer in deliverance. But it's layers. And in order to keep those layers to continue to get down to the core and stay
Hmm.
where you are and really stay delivered, you got to put off some things and put on some other things. So with the shame, how do you help someone not to believe they are bad? A lot of women who've been physically and sexually abused believe that they deserve it. They
Oh,
believe that, I am this bad it always happens. Why is it always happening? How come, my uncle is always doing this? How come my daddy? How come my mom is always doing this? I must deserve it. That's a state
yeah.
of being. That's shame. That's not
Yeah.
guilt. That's shame. And it's harder to actually overcome. It requires a lot of counseling. It requires a lot of walking with people. And talking about a man now. How do you walk with someone who believes that they deserve what happened to them? You got to treat them like they do deserve to be who God created them to be. And that is a child, a woman of God who
Yeah.
deserves love, who
Yeah.
deserves respect, who deserves, like I said, accountability, all those things. They got to see it in action. I always tell men, even the men in your age group, date
Hmm.
your daughters, take them out. If you want your daughter
Mm.
to know what kind of man she needs, you need to be that man. Take your daughter out
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
treat her like you treated your wife. You pull out that chair, because as long as she sees that, she ain't gonna look for these men to fill a void.
Hmm.
This need. A lot of women who are sexually abused and they become prostitutes, I've counseled them. That's the kind of men, because they didn't have that example. They didn't
Yeah.
know how. They didn't know how to, have the manners. They didn't know that you're supposed to do this with a woman. Open the door. You're supposed to say,
Yeah.
excuse me. You're supposed to be honest. Have dialogue. They didn't have that growing up. They
Yeah.
had different boundaries. So therefore,
Yeah.
they had no example of a godly father or an example of a man teaching a woman that they deserve. Date your daughter. And I ain't talking about date as you go have sex with them. You take them
Mm.
out. You show them
Of
how
course.
they're
Yeah.
supposed to be treated. And they're going to look for that kind of man when they get to be dating age, because from the beginning, when they're 9 and 10, when they're 8 and 7, even when they're doing tea parties, you show them, put the napkin, respect yourself. Don't be wearing short dresses. Don't be pulling up your dress. Tell your daughter, no, keep your privates down. Because little girls will do that just to be fun. We do it when we're 5 and
Mm.
6, pull our dresses up. We play with ourselves. No, don't do that. Ladies, don't do that. Young girls, we don't do that. We
Mm.
don't do that. And when that's done early, that is reinforcement. By the time they're teenage years, they will know how a respectful man acts.
Yeah.
If he's a Christian or not, respect, accountability. Keep your word. I'm going to pick you up from school
Yeah.
at 3 o'clock. When you're late and that gets reinforced, I can't count on them. And they look for that's how people get involved in gangs. Accountability. So I always tell men, date your daughters. Treat them like you would like, make sure that the man they get involved with, and they will never get involved with a man that will not respect them because they have an example. And even if they see it in school, they see their friends, they see
Hmm.
abusive things going on, they will say, and to the point where they can talk. Some girls will not talk to their fathers because of what they saw, heard, done. They don't have that openness. Be
Yeah.
open with your child.
Yeah.
Girl child. You're talking about as a man, how can you help these women? Start them early. And you got
Yeah.
teenage daughters, start them early. Start talking with them about everything. No subject is taboo, everything. And you let them know the right way. Girls keep
Hmm.
they keep their skirts down. Don't play with their clothes. And we want modesty is important. Why? You
Hmm.
tell them why modesty is important. You tell them why it's important to be honest and be honest with them. Yes, have boundaries. Don't get me wrong. Don't be all wide open, but you share with them.
Yeah.
Because the more open you are with them, they will come to you. There's a lot of children that do not talk to their parents. I learned this the hard way. I actually, in Nigeria, where I'm at, Northeast Nigeria, I'm in an
Hmm.
area that's relatively dangerous, actually. We have a lot of jihadist activity, and we're trying to build a healing center in that area. When I went there for the first time, I think I might have told you this testimony before, Eddie, where the youth pastor was killed. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a few days before. It was a few days before I got there. It was a Sunday. I got there on a Tuesday, and the youth pastor was killed. And everybody, the Muslims and the Christians, they all knew him. They respected him because he was good with young people. He knew how to
Yeah.
deal with young people. And everybody liked him. The whole community, not just believers, even non-believers, because of the way he carried himself. He was a young man. Well, unfortunately, he got involved with some people who faked their conversion, and he didn't discern that. They called him. They said they were on the way to church. Their car broke down. He went out there, ambushed, and killed them. When the whole
Yeah.
community found out, everybody, even the Muslims, everybody was distraught. When I was able to do some one-on-one counseling, I worked with church leaders. I worked with some of the Muslims. I worked with teenagers, predominantly Christian teenagers. Come to find out, that experience of what happened to the youth pastor triggered some things that happened to them that wasn't even related, but it was because of
Mm.
the jihadists. The jihadists killed their relatives, and or they raped some of these girls, and the parents did not even know. This happened in
Mm.
2021. And these people were triggered from things that happened in 2016 and
Yeah.
2018. And they never, and these were like children, young girls, and their fathers were pastors. They were oblivious. And the husband and wife, they cried. When I told
Yeah.
them, they never told me. She never said, oh, I didn't know she
Yeah.
was suffering. The shame. It's the shame,
Yeah.
not just
I.
guilt, it's the
I.
shame. Because, and what triggered that
Mhm.
event again was the death of this youth pastor that happened in
Mm.
2021. Even
Yeah.
though what happened to them happened years later. So I always tell people, have a relationship with your child. Have a relationship with your daughter. You're talking about as a man, how to help women. Start them early. And even as they get older, young ladies, even at your wife's age, treat every woman with respect.
Yeah.
Because when they see it, even as an older woman, they'll say, oh, maybe my husband don't do that, but Eddie does it. And they have something they can measure and they can even think about. I
Yeah.
tell men all the time, you want to help a woman that's been abused, physically or sexually, treat them the way that you
Yeah.
want them. And a lot of times, women that have been sexually abused, you can't be touching on them. And you can't look at them a certain way. Sometimes looking away from them, or like I'm looking at your nose. Don't look them eye to eye, because that will bother them. So
Yeah.
learn to have patience. Sometimes men don't know what to do. I always tell men, number one, be patient.
Yeah.
Be patient. And getting back to that story with the deacon, come to find out with the onion layers that that young lady was involved in incest with her father and was still doing it. That's why they're having problems in the marriage. When they would go over to the in-laws' house, he would go into a room with the daughter, and the wife knew, but she didn't say nothing. The mother-in-law, the deacon had no, these are all the mother and father, the daughter and father just having a private conversation. No. And the daughter, the young girl, that's her sister and her daughter, because the father got her daughter pregnant. And little girl, by the time they came for counseling, she was 3 going on 4, but looked just like, like twins, looked just like her mother. Come to find out that her father had fathered this young lady, this little girl. And when the deacon found out, this all came out again, dealing with onion layers. We were in counseling for 8 months before all that came out. Because again, it comes back to trust. They had to trust me enough to open up more and more and more. So as a man, for you, Eddy, how can you help get them to trust? What does that mean? Number 1, patience. Because some of these women that have really been messed up, you can't touch them a certain way. You can't look at them a certain way. You have to learn. So patience. And then when you know you've triggered something in them, apologize right away. I'm so sorry. That was not my intention. And be sincere. I didn't know that. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. I didn't know that that bothered you, this kind of music or this perfume or this setting. I'm sorry. They don't get that. When they've been abused, sometimes it's wham bam and it's through. And nobody's saying sorry, even if they're intentionally meaning it. So you gotta have patience, number 1, because you're gonna make sure you're gonna mess up. Yes, you will. But you gotta own it up right away. Don't let it linger, not even one day. Right away. I'm sorry. I didn't know that disturbed you. That was not my intention. I don't know. And be real. So you're gonna be a man, be real. I didn't know that bothered you. I'm sorry. It doesn't bother me, but I didn't know that bothered you. I didn't know
Yeah.
that boundary was broken. I didn't know that. Please forgive me. They don't get that. As you do that more and more, they open up, and you're gonna hear a whole lot of stuff. And that's how I do things in counseling. I don't always find out things right away, but with those young people, when I had them to talk about how they felt when that youth pastor was killed, all of a sudden I'm finding out what happened to them 5 years ago and how they were raped, and they couldn't tell their parents because they had to be perfect. We don't talk about that at home, and we gotta be good little Christian people, and they're all locked up, suffering in silence.
Yeah.
So I tell people that's how you can help. That's how you can help build that trust. Go back to those 3 things. Help with the guilt. And there's many ways to do that. But that shame, that is the kicker. It takes a long time. But that 3rd thing will kind of bridge those 2 together is trust. Gain their trust. Treat them like they need to be treated on all levels, even in communication. Be honest, be open to a fault. Don't open up all them boundaries, but open up to the point where they'll open up to you. Because when they see you real with them, they will be real with you. And that's how you can help a woman, especially as a man that has been sexually abused, that has been physically abused. We're talking about power. That's a power thing. Rape is not a sexual, it is a power violation.
Yeah.
It got nothing to do with sex. Sex is the vehicle. It's power. It's authority misused. It is control. Number 1. It is with a capital C. It's control. Rape is a control thing. It got nothing to do with sex. Just because people get
Sira.
raped don't mean that they're sex fiends. Yeah, they might
Yeah.
have that. There could be some little, ideologies and behavioral, but most of the time, rape, and it's not even considered it's sexual. It happens sexually, but it happens because of control. It happens because of power. It is a power thing. And when
Yeah.
people understand that, and how you relinquish the power, that's how you help women. You be
Yeah.
vulnerable. You
Yeah.
be loving, and you will see those scales falling off. You will see they're all locked up. You'll see them kind of opening up and being a little open and not all rigid. You will see them because they're seeing you. doing that, and they're seeing you not being as control and manipulating and all this, even in your conversation. That's how you help women.
The Unbroken Place podcast will be back in just a moment. What if the clarity you've been searching for isn't out there, but already within you? I'm Eddy Thomas, life and leadership coach. I work with purpose-driven people who are ready to lead boldly, live intentionally, and grow from the inside out. Whether you're at a crossroads or leveling up, coaching can help you move with confidence, wisdom, and impact. This is your time. Visit eddypaulthomas.com to get started. Imagine a place where the untold stories of Black missionaries are amplified, honored, and celebrated. A place that bridges the legacy of the people of the way with the powerful missions work of today's African diaspora. Welcome to the Black Missions Museum, a digital project dedicated to preserving the voices, culture, and legacy of Black missionaries across the globe. But we need your help to bring this vision to life. Your support makes a difference. Join us in this mission by donating today. Just click the link in the show notes to give and be a part of history. Together, we can inspire future generations and keep the legacy alive. In today's fast-moving world, thriving teams and ethical leadership are essential to business success. So how do entrepreneurs build spaces where people flourish while scaling up? At Elevate One Consulting, Dr. Erica Garcia-Thomas and Eddy Thomas are helping organizations grow with purpose. Blending evidence-based strategies, interactive training, and dynamic speaking, they equip leaders to boost engagement, transform culture, and drive results. From executive advising to brand revitalization, Elevate One delivers solutions that help your business do more than survive. It thrives. Visit elevateoneconsulting.com to get started. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. And we're back. Yeah. I want to see that. I want to go back to something you said earlier because it resonated with me about the dating your daughter thing, and I know that you unpacked a lot because there's so much to consider when you're trying to be an ally, when you're trying to be a support or a rock for that woman in your life, whether it be your sister, your wife, your friends, whatever it is. I was involved in men's groups here in Charlotte and in the Midwest, specifically Black fathers, talking about how to do that. Because one of the things that came back over and over and over as men, we struggled. And I don't want to speak for all men because I cannot speak for all men. I cannot speak for all cultures. But the Black fathers who were in this group were down for the cause to uplift and support Black women. Black and white women, just whoever in our lives in terms of race, but just the concept of understanding what it means to be a Black father for women who have been abused. Understanding that there is statistically a high probability that your children will have to go through that if they're women. So
And
it's a
become
very real
abusers.
thing.
And become abusers. The statistics
Yeah,
are and it's not just a stat thing, it's real. And it's even
yeah,
spiritual. If that
yeah,
is not dealt with, most women that have been
exactly.
abused will become abusers themselves.
In some
If
way,
it's
shape, or
not
form.
dealt with
Absolutely,
on some
absolutely.
levels. Yes.
Yeah, and so it's something that we took seriously, and I recall you talking about the conversation about the type of clothes they wear and men now being in a place where they're trying to figure out, okay, yes, absolutely, 100% women should be able to wear whatever they want, whenever they want, express themselves how they want. But as a father, you also know that the world doesn't operate always that way, that women do have to fear the activities of some men. I'm not saying all men, and there's no way in the world that it could be all men. But that conversation is so tough to have for men to process through with their children, about having the ability to express themselves as women, as young women, but also, we're trying to protect you um, from the grossness that we see in this world, and it's a tough conversation. But I want to go back also to another part that you spoke of, and I have that statistic right in front of me. That 8 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone the victim knows. It's not some random person that just kind of jumps out of nowhere, like you see in the movies, where I'd never known this guy before, and it happens. Um, and it takes me to a question of power dynamics. You said it was about power, so I'm curious. How can men be more aware of the power dynamics in their relationships and use that awareness to kind of foster or create more equity and safety for women in your experience?
What has to happen, Eddie, is men have to realize that is where they are. I would say, unless a man on his own goes and has counseling or is able to have a one-on-one accountability person that they can be real
Hmm.
with. Now, I always tell people that, and even as Christians, we'll say, have an accountability person. And they say, well, my wife's my accountability, which is true on one level, but the deep stuff,
Hmm.
that needs to be man to man, woman to woman. And yes, you
Yeah.
have a wife, Eddie, but your accountability person needs to be a brother. It needs to be a
Hmm.
brother who is at your level and above spiritually, because this person is going to tell you when you're wrong, and you'll be able to listen to him. He'll be able to, iron sharpens iron. He'll be able
Yeah.
to, and you might not like what he has to say, but one thing that has to happen is you, and I'm saying you third person, not necessarily Eddie, but I'm putting this
Sure.
out third person. You have to be
Hmm.
aware of your sexuality. In order to help a woman in your home, young girl, take them real young all the way up to adulthood, you have to be aware, because it's true, it is a power. So how do you deal with that? You have to know your sexuality. A lot of men who commit these rapes, they've been abused, and that's a
Yeah.
high stat, more than 70%. That
Yeah.
these men, the rapists, and it's because their fathers were controlling, mothers were controlling. You have to look at yourself. I say introspection and looking at yourself is hard for a lot of people. But I will say it's especially hard for men. It's hard to really look at yourself with a critical eye. And when you look at yourself from that perspective sexually, it helps you to see where your power lies. If you come from a very domineering household and your father laid down the law,
Hmm.
he laid it down. And depending on how you perceive that, how you filtered that, will actually tell you how you deal with women. It does start at home. It does start at home. If
Yeah.
you got a domineering mother, um, men that become abusers, they think, oh, they like my mama. I got to stifle that. They don't like all that, you have to look at the
Uh,
power dynamic. Like you said, it starts at home.
gotcha.
It starts with male and female on different levels, different domains.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is a stable, I'm trying to get oh, help me, Lord. A stable and a balance. That's what I'm trying to find. A balanced home. You have to be able to balance your authority with vulnerability, accountability, love, unconditional love. I
Yeah.
think we talked last time in one of our discussions, the importance when you discipline a child, male or female. If you're going
Hmm.
to beat them, fist corporal, you're going to beat them. Make sure. You let them know before you beat them why they're going to get beat. It's a different dynamic. If you're my son, Eddie, and you did something and I just haul off and beat you, and yeah, you know you did something wrong, but I don't tell you I'm going to beat you and this is why. You're going to look at beatings a little bit differently. But every
Yeah.
time I physically have to discipline you, and I tell you, Eddie, this is what you did, and you know what? I will beat you or I'll spank you. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to get punished because this is what you did and it's not right.
Yeah.
The Bible says you can beat a child, but he shall not die, which means you don't abuse them. Because you got to know the balance again. Am I abusing physically? Because I'm a survivor of physical and sexual abuse myself in my own life. And you have to have a balance. You have to know when you beat a child, is it physical abuse? Or if you're beating a child and it's corporal punishment.
Mm-hmm.
Sexual abuse, there ain't no boundary. It ain't, you don't do that with a child. You don't touch
Yeah.
no child,
Yeah. Yeah.
period. But physically, everybody, oh, but say the Bible said people want to always talk about. You unpack that verse, really
Yeah.
unpack it, and you find out what the author was saying, which was David, if I'm not mistaken. You beat a child, he shall not die, which means you're not going to beat a child to where you have to go to the hospital, you break an arm. No. But you
Yeah.
always, not sometimes,
Yeah.
Eddie, I'm always going to tell you why I'm going to beat
Mm-hmm.
you. And children look at corporal punishment differently. Remember, it's a learned behavior. If I'm just beating you and I'm throwing a chair at you or I'm with my fist
Yeah.
or I'm doing this stuff, these things are learned behaviors.
Yeah.
And we're talking about control. We're talking about the reason why I'm doing that. When I have to counsel men that have been abusive with anger issues, anger management, I ask them, well, why do you have to use a fist? How come you can't use a object? How come you got to use your hand? How come you got a ball? How come you can't use your open palm? How come you have to do this? This is going to hurt more. Why do you have to
Yeah.
do that? And the answers I'm getting, the control, it all comes down to control. It sends that signal. So it's not so much the power, but why do you need that power? What is it?
Yeah.
And you break all that down, you unpack that, and it could take a long time. You're
Mm-hmm.
gonna find out it happened in childhood. The father or
Yeah.
the mother or the authority person, maybe they didn't grow up with a parent, maybe they grew up with an uncle or an aunt or grandparents. They have a worldview, they have a perception, they got a paradigm of how they do things in the house. If the child does not perceive it the way as a correction or a way that it's going to help them or a way that's going to grow them, it's going to go back negative. And then when they see women,
Yeah.
especially men, when they see women, it could be a mama thing. Yes, it can. Mama was too tight. If that's the case, when they see a woman, they're going to want, I got to control that. I couldn't control my mama. I can beat you, I can control you, or I can control my daddy.
Yeah.
And it's not always men with women. As I told you, I've actually counseled many women who do beat men.
Yeah.
And some of these men are not, quote unquote, what they call henpecked. Some of these men are not like that. Some of these men, they know I should not beat a woman. Women are the weaker vessel. I've had men that were beaten by women and they refused because they had a good example in the home. We don't beat women, but the wife was abused or the wife had a bad example and she will beat her husband. And the husband does everything he can because he knows he had a godly example. I can't beat her. I mean, Eddie, I've counseled several. The wife was the abuser.
Yeah.
And the husband will refuse, not because he's handpicked. He knows we don't beat women. We don't, that's not happening in my home. That's not what the
Yeah.
example I had. That's not what the Bible teaches. I don't do that. And they be all bruised up, broken. The women beat them with chairs. The only way they can really
Yeah.
hurt them because they're weaker than the husband physically. But they got to get a weapon or they shoot them or whatever. And the husband will not do nothing, not because they henpecked. Now some of them might be, but a lot of these men, they had a paradigm. We don't beat women. And
Mm-hmm.
and having to get, now that's hard. You talking about state of being. That's shame too. You got to get that man to understand, okay, now your wife is wrong, but we got to find a way to help her without hurting her physically.
Yeah.
Now that's
Yeah.
not easy either, but these are things that takes a lot of counseling, a lot of time. So it goes back
Yeah.
again to your upbringing. Hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, it's I love that you kind of tell stories from your experience. It's not just cookie cutter answers, because it gives the listeners um really a lot to chew on. I for me, I know in our household we don't spank at all. And I grew up with spankings, and that was just normal. I mean, culturally, my cousins, my friends, we all got spankings. I don't know if it's a Midwest thing or a global thing. I have no idea, but I know that it was something I grew up with. But what happened for me, specifically, and actually my wife as well, in a different capacity, I worked for a group in CPS, Child Protective Services. The um, division was called the Medical Fragile and Fatality Unit. And I will tell you that it was hard to have a good day in that unit. I wasn't called to, check and see often if there was food in the house. No, these were severe scenarios in which I had to go, and I was in court, and I had to witness these children who had been through a lot. Not because, and I want people to understand, yes, what the parents did was awful, but these weren't bad people. These were people who had a bad day and lost control. Every single one of them. When you sat down and
Or not to interrupt
Mhm.
you, or not just a bad
Yeah,
day, but they could have had, like I said, you don't know their childhood. You don't know what happened to
yeah,
them. People who abuse and beat and all that, that
yeah,
stats are high, and it's true. I'm saying as a counselor, they
yeah.
grew up in that on some
Very
level.
true. Very true.
Not
I
just a
think
bad day. They
I
just
think
had a bad life. And one thing I say about those
hmm
kind of people, and I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, Eddie, for saying
yeah.
that about them. They're not bad people. They're hurt people. And what I always
Yes.
tell
Yes.
people, hurt people hurt people. I'll say it
Yep.
again. Hurt people will hurt people. Physically, emotionally, verbally, mentally, sexually, physically. If they are hurt and they have not been healed, they
hmm
will hurt others.
And I think it is a symptom of trying to take their power back in some way,
Mhm.
shape, or form.
Exactly.
Um, and so I look at that, and I know that's why we don't spank. Just, I mean, Erica's worked in mental health. I've worked in mental health. It just, it's not even a thing. We figure out a different way. But
Exactly.
I want to go um, to a little bit more of your clinical experience on this part, because I read a report. This was I think it was the Ballard brief that was talking about sexual abuse in college. Um, and I'd love to hear your take on this, because the report alleged that there was a correlation. 6% of men admitted to rape in college, and so just that they had the mentality of doing so in college. And so if we're to take this correlation between the number of rapes that actually happen and 6%, sure, there can be variance, but I wasn't a part of the report. If 6% of men are committing all of this, all of these heinous acts, in your experience, what is it that prevents men from acknowledging and confronting abusive behavior in their peers? If you've never done this as a man, which I would assume that a majority of men have not been engaged in this, I'm just looking at the numbers. I don't have a microscope to look into everyone's lives. But if the numbers are telling us that a majority of men are not committing this, and a smaller number are committing several rapes, several sexual acts that are unwanted and uncalled for. What is it that prevents men from speaking and acting when they see or hear about this occurring?
We have to go back, Eddie, again, what we talked about even earlier about those three things and going back to shame. Even if they don't report it or if they don't actually do, they know. And a lot of times it's, how will people react to me if I
Mm-hmm.
say, or if I do, or if I admit? And this is why, and this is one of the stats that I actually have that talks about, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't want to quote the number, but I will say it's a high, over 20% of people that actually will say, and like you said, that means 80% don't say anything, is because of the shame, because of what people will think about them, especially in American culture. Now, we're going to go through a cultural thing as well, because in the United
Mm-hmm.
States, we're very individualistic.
Yeah.
It's me,
Hyper,
myself, and I.
hyper individualistic.
And
Yeah.
because of that, opinions of from others, not just of others, but from others is very important
Yeah.
for us. And then there are some, as Americans, and there are some people that thrive on that. Maybe, and again, we're talking about things that happened in the past. A lot of these men who don't say anything and how it's preventing to say anything is because of the shame, the state of being. They feel, and it's not just a feeling, it's not just guilt. They believe these negative things. If I say, then people are not going to like me. They're going to look at me a certain way. Or if I admit that I'm a weak person, and that
Mm-hmm.
feeling of inadequacy, that feeling of I'm not good enough, goes back, and words are powerful.
Yeah.
And I do more counseling with that, even in Nigeria. They love to say people are, and when you want to say people are really bad and just really awful, Nigerians will say they are wicked. That word
Mm-hmm.
wicked is profound in Nigeria. If you hear a Nigerian say somebody is wicked, it's worse than being bad. It's worse than
Yeah.
being awful. Wicked is like it is in the Bible. It's really, it's high up there. And
Mm-hmm.
they always talk about people being wicked, people being mean, and people being just these terrible. Change the narrative. And I had to catch myself as an American, because we use those kind of words, these adverbs and adjectives. We use them just rolling off our tongue, and we like to quote saying that death and life is the power of the tongue, but it really is. If I'm always saying, Eddie, you're stupid. Eddie, you don't
Mm-hmm.
think enough. Eddie, you always doing it. Eddie, you just can't get yourself together. State of being. Now I'm gonna believe that I can't get myself together. If I'm always told, and a lot of these
Yeah.
men in college, now they're by themselves. They ain't controlling mommy, daddy, uncle, aunt, grandparents. They are not there. And that's why some of these men do commit, because they don't have that clutch. So they
Yeah.
will, yes, they will. And then that's one level. Then on another level, the ones who won't, they believe it. And now they don't know how, there's no reinforcement. There's nobody to
Mm-hmm.
tell them the positive. So all they got in their head, I'm lazy. I'm always going to be lazy.
Yeah.
Why? Because you were told, when I was growing up, and the reason why I I was kind of a bully when I was younger, they had a nickname for me. They called me Bad Shirley. I ain't lying. That's what they called me, because
Mm-hmm.
I handle stuff. I didn't let no one ever got over me. I was very physical growing up. And I'm the one that I mean, I praise God. I was never expelled from school or suspended, but I do things like I'll meet you at the sandbox. I'll meet you on the
Mm.
corner. I knew how to get my business taken care of without getting in trouble in school. But no, I'm not gonna lie. I was out there, Eddie. I ain't gonna
Hmm.
lie. I was. So, and that actually got in my mind. Not until I knew the Lord and started walking in the Lord did I realize I'm not a bad person. But I believe that about myself. I'm just this bad person. I'm bad. I'm an angry woman. I would believe that because I was. Words are powerful. And a
Yeah.
lot of these men in college, not just the influence of being under somebody's thumb and getting that freedom, but they don't have that reinforcement. They've taken into college. I'm a bad person. I'm ignorant. I'm lazy. I can't talk. Low
Mm.
self-esteem. I can't do things for myself. And you don't got nobody to tell you you're not like that. So they're carrying that. So even if they know what's going on, or even if they committed themselves, they're not gonna talk about it because
Yeah.
it's the reinforced mindset of when they were home
Yeah.
and now they are in college and they don't have no restraints and nobody's telling them, but at the same turn of coin, nobody is reinforcing the good. Remember, putting off and putting on. Nobody's telling them you're not a bad person. So when things happen, either they do it or they witness it. They're not going to say nothing because they're a bad person. I'm not responsible. All my life I was told that. How come you can't be
Yeah.
like somebody else? Comparing.
Mm.
That's another thing that we do inadvertently. How come you're not like so and so? So and so
Yeah.
always cleans, and you always leave your stuff in the middle of the floor. And we say that even in our, like, to have a bad day, we will get in our flesh and say all kinds of stuff. And we all do it, and we have to catch our words after the fact. And if we do, right away, you know, I'm sorry I said that about you. It's not true. I said that out of anger. I wasn't having a good day and I took it out on you. That's not your fault. But we don't even do that.
Yeah.
Black, white, I don't care what racial ethnicity we are. We don't do that. So now we have reinforced in our child this non-compliant or this attitude of, well, I don't gotta do it. They didn't do it for me. I don't gotta do it for them. Or,
Right. Right.
no restraint. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I would say those are the top three. I think I gave three examples. Those are the ones,
Okay.
either you had all this tightness at home and now you just free, but you got no reinforcement. Or if you're committing it, it's because you were not told. And this is your power thing. You're trying to get your power back because you didn't have no power at
Yeah.
home. So now I
Yeah.
got power now, but you don't know how to
Yeah.
deal with your power because you're
Yeah.
independent.
Yeah. There's so much to chew on. I'm just trying to put myself empathetically in the seat of people listening to this conversation. You've given men a lot, particularly. I mean, women are going to know this um, from firsthand experience. But you've given a lot of men something to really think about and to digest today. And I think before we kind of wrap up here in the last couple minutes, I would love for you just to take a moment and help us figure out as men what are some practical steps that we can take to support the emotional well-being and autonomy of the women in our lives. And we're talking partners, coworkers, friends, family. Like, give us 3 steps. What are 3 things that we can do to help in those areas?
If you really want to help a woman and you realize this woman has been abused physically, sexually, verbally, anything, and because she'll have a behavior. And most of them are very, they're timid or they have behavior back and forth, back and forth. Number one,
Mhm.
patience. Don't be quick to
Yeah,
speak and giving your opinion about something because you don't know what you're going to trigger. And that is the
makes sense.
hardest thing, not just for men, even for women, having patience. If you know a woman has been abused, be quick to listen and be silent. Let them talk. Let them be the one to open up. And as I said earlier in the conversation, be an example. Young girls, date your daughters, give them respect, show them, let them know that they are queens, they are to be respected, they are to, and not just say you got to wear a long dress or you got to tell them why it's important to be modest.
Yeah.
And not saying that they can't wear, so, or even have different viewpoint. Maybe you don't have that viewpoint. Like you said, a lot of men and women, they want to express themselves different ways nowadays, may they be Christian or not. But then here's the thing that I always tell people. This is a sexualized generation now. It's more sexualized than it was back in the 60s when sex was really free. It is, and it's in a different format, but it is very sexualized because we got a lot of social media. Anything and everything is out there. But then you got to put yourself in your place. If you don't want your daughter or someone you care about to be abused, how would you want you throw it back at them? How would you want them to be treated? You'd be surprised what a lot of these sexual men will say. First of all, they won't say anything. They'll just kind of think about it. It's like deer in the headlight. A man that is very sexualized, when you say that literally to them, they're going to be quiet, first and foremost, because that's something they don't expect to hear. How would you want to be someone, a woman in your life, mother, daughter, and you find out their relationship? You'll find out by their answer. But a lot of these men are not going to say anything right away. They're going to think about that. And they have to, because we are in a sexualized context now more than ever. And it's important that women are respected. So respect them. Like I said, date your daughter, not sex. Date them. What does that mean? Respect. It means you show them the right way of doing things. Spend time. Be honest. Now, that's another thing. Not tell them what you want to hear. Tell them the truth. And even do it in love. A lot of men don't do that. A lot of men feel like I got to say things that make me look good or make the woman look good. No, tell the truth. People will respect you more when you're honest. Even if you're brutally honest, they might say, oh, I just hate the way he said it, but he was right. And eventually you will learn to say things the right way. But a lot of people, I hear people say that a lot. Oh yeah, I don't like the way he said that, but he was right. Just learn how to learn how to say things the right way, but respect, realize that they do have rights. You go back to my 80s and 70s, but we can go back even further. 20s, 30s, and 40s. That's a whole different generation how they treated women. And women accepted that because that was a time period. But now women are educated, they can do things. We'll still treat them like they're women, still treat them like they need to be treated correctly. Don't just, I know you can fry the bacon, put it in a pan, you can do it all. You can, I know you can do that, but still treat them like they are deserving. They are queens. They are princesses. You need to be aware of yourself. And that is the hardest thing for most men, especially to be aware of yourself. A lot of men are not aware until they're made aware, and made aware to the point where they can hear it. Because some people, you'll tell them they don't want to hear it. You got to get to a point where a man can hear that, you know what, this is really a problem with you. And they might not even know. And it goes back to the childhood. It does not happen like overnight. It's something 30, 40, 50 years ago because they had an overbearing parent, male or female, or they had this, that, and the other. And that's why they act the way they do. But they got to be more aware. And that takes accountability. So for a man, I would say, my brother, and even if you're married, you need another man that you can be real with, that you can go out. You can go to the Waffle House. You can sit down at a booth away from some people, or go to the park, and you can just bare your soul. I actually use those words directly. Not just say anything, bare your soul, because a lot of men don't say what's really on their mind because they're worried about what somebody's going to think about them. A man can tell another man, I'm really scared, and not feel like I'm weak. Man, I'm just really, I'm just flabbergasted. I'm just discouraged. I just don't understand why. Men are not going to do that unless they feel like they're respected and they feel like they're being listened to. That's so important. I would say that is more for Christian as well as non-Christians. You need a man that will listen to you. will not judge you, will tell you when you are wrong. Eddy, you are wrong. Not a woman saying it to you, a man, not your wife,
Mm-hmm.
another man that
Mm-hmm.
you respect, you can be
Yeah.
accountable to. And vice versa. You can tell him the same thing. That is what will flourish. That will change a man's behavior and attitude about a woman, especially a woman that has been hurt. When
Yeah.
you realize, I do have this power, but I'm misusing it. I need to know how to use my power because I am powerful. And if you don't teach that correctly, I'm powerful. No, they are. But you need to know how to exert that power correctly. You need to realize that you don't beat a woman in submission. You don't verbally abuse her, tell her she's stupid all the time and all that. No, you do have power, but you now know how to use it in the way that uplifts her. And if you cannot do that, you will always have a problem in communication.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sira, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much
Thank you for
for
having me.
joining us on the Unbroken Place. We will make sure to put some information in the show notes so that people can follow you and support your work. But this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eddy.
The Unbroken Place podcast is presented by Elevate One Consulting. The show was produced by Say Something Studios. Learn more about both of these in the show notes. The show's music is performed by Kesta, Anthem of Rain, and Holzna Raps. Thank you for being a part of the Unbroken Place community. Look for an ongoing conversation on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also find some helpful resources at eddypaulthomas.com. And make sure to sign up for our newsletter called OK on Second Thought on LinkedIn. Until next time, one love.